So, good morning once again. In this lecture, I will be discussing with you about two more diodes, and they are also special purpose diodes. And those special purpose diodes are basically the photodiode and the light emitting diodes. So, the first diode that I am going to talk about is the photodiode. Photodiode, as the name suggests, that it is a diode which interacts with the photons. You must have read about photodiode in basically in your in intermediate also. So photodiode is a reverse bias PN junction diode. It interacts with the photons. So therefore, in the PN junction diode, we have to have some window so that we can expose it with light. That is how we have to fabricate it. So it's a reverse bias PN junction in which reverse current increases when the junction is exposed to light. The reverse saturation current in the photodiode, you will see that it is directly proportional to the intensity of light falling on the PN junction. This is the symbol. This symbol is similar to a PN junction diode, and you will see that if the light is coming out, if the arrows are inside the diode, it is the symbol of photodiode, and you will see sometimes after this in the same lecture that you will see if the light is going away from it, it's a light emitting diode. So since it interacts with the photon, there must be a window, I told you, for the light to enter and fall on the depletion layer or near it. When the light falls on the PN junction, the electron hole pair are generated. So you recall basically the energy level diagram of a N-type or a semiconductor in general. This is a top of a valency band. This is the bottom of the conduction band. And if you see that if some photons are incident onto the semiconductor material here, there are electrons here in the valency band. They are filled. There are no states in the forbidden band, but in conduction band, there are large number of states, even if all the labels are empty. So what we can do is, once the photons are going to be incident onto this, these photons are going to help the electrons in the valency band to raise to the conduction band, to take a transition to the conduction band. So the vacancy of electron in the valency band will correspond to a hole, and the electron in the conduction band will correspond to an electron, and we call it as electron hole pair generation. What is the condition that this photon has to satisfy to basically help an electron in the conduction band, in the valency band, to take it to a valency band? This is a condition. The value of Eg is hc by lambda. The photon wavelength must be such that the energy of a photon, the minimum energy of a photon, must be equal to the band gap energy. You can see that with this type of energy, if with this value of energy, that is Eg band gap energy, the electron sitting very near to the valency band will take a transition to the top of the conduction band, and any value larger than the value of Eg will help the electrons in the valency band to take a transition to the conduction band, and that is how the electron hole pairs are generated. The value of H is already known to you. H is 6.6 into 10 to the power minus 34 joule second. C is 3 into 10 to the power of 8. So if you put this value here and calculate and then convert this energy into the electron volt, because if you put the value of H, C and lambda in, let us say, meter, this will come out to be electron volts. Sorry, in joules. To convert it into electron volts, you have to divide it by 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19. If you put all those values here, and then this comes out to be 1240 electron volt nanometer divided by lambda. That means if you put the value of lambda in nanometer, you can directly get the value of the band gap just by remembering this simple formula. So if I put a value of lambda to be 400 nanometer, 400 nanometer is basically the violet light, or the starting end of the visible light. This 400 nanometer corresponds to 3.1 electron volt. You can see here, if you replace lambda by 400 nanometer, so divide 4 3 are 12 and 4 1 are 4. So this is 3.1 electron volt. Similarly, if I put 620 nanometer well within the visible range, so 620 nanometer, so 1240 divided by 620 will give us 2 electron volt. So 620 nanovolt photon has an energy of 2 electron volt. So in general, we can say that for a visible light, 400 nanometer to 700 nanometer, the energy of a photon will lie in the range 1.8 electron volt to 3.2 electron volt. This is basically a schematic diagram of a PN junction diode. This outer enclosure must be transparent here so that we can allow the light to be incident onto the depletion layer or very close to the depletion layer. Since it is used in reverse biasing only, that is why N end is shown here to be connected to the positive end of a battery and N to the negative end of a battery. And this resistance here is basically a sort of safety resistance. So if we talk about silicon diode, you all know that its band gap is 1.1 electron volt. So 1.1 electron volt, you can see this energy of visible photons, energy of the photons in the visible range has a larger energy than the energy required to generate electron hole pair in a silicon semiconductor, or in germanium semiconductor also. Germanium has 0.7 electron volt as its forbidden band. So the visible light is capable of creating electron hole pair current, thereby increasing the carriers or my electron hole pairs. Since now the reverse bias current is basically because of the minority carriers. So here this current is because of the minority carriers. If you shine it with a light whose photons are more energetic than the band gap of a semiconductor, we can help the electron to rise from the valency band to the conduction band, thereby generating electron hole pair. The phenomena is called electron hole pair generation. So large number of electron hole pairs are generated. Initially, the number of minority carriers are very small. So these electron hole pairs will give rise to the number of minority carriers by a very large amount. Larger the intensity of light, larger will be the electron hole pair generated, larger will be the minority carriers available for the current to pass through, and larger will be the reverse saturation current. Now you must be thinking that suppose I have a forward bias PN junction diode. A forward bias PN junction diode, you shine it with light, what will happen? Think yourself. If you shine a forward bias PN junction diode, you allow some light to be incident onto a forward bias PN junction diode. In case of forward bias diode also, large number of electron hole pairs will be generated. But you all know that in case of forward bias, the characteristics is controlled by the majority carriers. So with those generation of electron hole pairs, the remarkable change is not there. There is no change in the majority carriers. That is why the characteristics will not be affected by the light to be incident on it. And we make use of a reversed biased PN junction for measuring the intensity of light, and some people call it as even the photo detector also. You allow the light to be incident on it, and you will see further that the current keeps on changing linearly with the intensity of light. So it's a reverse bias. I hope it is clear that why photodiode is a reverse bias PN junction. Why it is reverse biased? Why not forward biased? So you can see this schematic diagram. You have a battery. The positive is connected to the N end and the negative is connected to the P end. That means it is reverse biased. This is a symbol of a photodiode. This R here is nothing but a safety resistance, because if you allow more current to pass through the PN junction diode, there is a chance of damaging it also. So if there is no light incident onto the diode here, what will happen? The reverse saturation current, or I can call it as reverse current, the reverse current is very small, and this reverse current under no light condition is called dark current. This is called dark current, normal, very small reverse current of a reverse bias PN junction. When the light is incident, you can see here also, when the light is incident onto the PN junction, the only condition is that the energy of the photon must be larger than the band gap of the PN junction diode material. The incident light photons interact with the atoms in the junction, creating more electron hole pair, thereby increasing the reverse diode current. So if you see the IV diagram here, the current, this is a dark current that you already know, it's very small. In fact, you will do the experiment in the lab also to measure the forward bias current and the reverse bias current, both for the ordinary PN junction diode and the Zener diode as well. Here, if you change the light intensity, this arrow indicates that I am changing the intensity. E2 is larger than E1, E3 is larger than E2. So intensity of light is increasing. You see more and more number of electron hole pair generated, basically the minority carriers generated. They increase the reverse saturation current by larger amount. If you plot a separate graph plotting basically the reverse current onto the y-axis and the intensity of light incident onto the photodiode or a junction diode junction in a milliwatt per centimeter square, you will see that it varies linearly with the intensity of light. That is why this photodiode is used for measuring the intensity of light. It is used as a photo detector. Now coming to the application, there are several applications you will find of the photodiode. It is used in light detection in the light operated switches. In some of the houses, you will see that at the entrance door, on one side, you have basically something like laser source, while on the other side, you have basically a photodiode. As long as the light coming from the diode is incident onto the photodiode, you have basically the diode circuit complete. Suppose somebody crosses the door. So if somebody crosses the door, what will happen? He or she is going to obstruct the light path. That means the laser light falling onto the photodiode. So what will happen? The diode current will suddenly come down. It is the dark current. And if you are going to connect an alarm inside your house, the alarm will blow up and that will show you that somebody has entered your house. So light operated switches are there, and it is also used in light detection. Even it is used as counter circuits. There are conveyor belts, and on the conveyor belts, if large number of items are going to pass and you have to count the number of items, you can count them by basically making use of the photodiode circuit. The basic physics remains the same. What will happen? You have to arrange basically a diode circuit. On one side, you have a laser source. On the other side of a conveyor belt, you have a photodiode. So you will see, basically, I have not plotted the diagram here, but in your textbook, you will see the diagram. You will see the laser light coming out falling on the photodiode. It will fall on the photodiode when there is no obstruction in its path, and it is adjusted that whatever is on the conveyor belt passes from this path, the light is obstructed. So that is how basically it amounts to the counting circuit. It can count the number of items passing over a conveyor belt. It is very common in an optical communication system. And then counter system, I have already told you that you have to have, you can basically know from your house if somebody enters, if your door is open, provided the door has basically a photodiode circuit, and the laser is also required to basically have a complete circuit. Similarly, counter alarm circuit, Similarly, you can have a theft alarm also. Suppose you have basically a lock at your door, and that makes use of a photodiode circuit. Some thief comes at night, and using the torch, he has to see basically the lock. The moment the torch light is incident onto the photodiode, what will happen? The current starts flowing, and that will basically blow a horn inside your house. So that is how it is used as a theft alarm. Also, you will see in most of the electronic circuits used by basically the engineering graduates, even at the 12th class students also make use of these photodiodes for alarm circuit or photo detection. After this, now I will talk about another diode, that is light emitting diode. All of you are familiar with light emitting diode. Nowadays, what is happening? Those big tube lights, the LEDs, they have been replaced by basically LED bulbs in our house. I'm talking about basically the same LED. It has basically revolutionized basically the entire electric system, because power consumption in LED is small, as you will see further. This LED is a specially made forward biased PN junction which emits a visible light. In fact, these LED bulbs you are seeing since last 1 year or 1.5 years. But even earlier to that also, you must have seen the small colored LED blinking on some of basically the electronic appliance at your home. But now we have basically the white light LEDs also, which are very popular nowadays. So we have to understand that how do they work. And again, as I told you in case of photodiode, that some sort of a transparent window must be there for the light to enter the junction. Here it is other way around. The same transparent window will allow the light, if any, generated near the junction. So there must be an exit window for the light to come out. And you can see that diagram. Here in the diagram, the only difference between photodiode and light emitting diode, the light emitting diode, since it gives us light, so we have the arrow basically showing us as if the light is coming out of this. So when a PN junction diode is forward biased, what will happen? The electrons, you all know that electrons moves from N side to P side, and holes from P side basically cross the junction. So if you increase the forward biasing, you are allowing more and more electrons and holes to basically cross the junction from N side and P side. When they cross a junction, when the electron moves from N side to P side, or hole from P side to N side, basically the phenomena opposite to the generation of charge carrier takes place. It is called recombination. When the electron sitting in the conduction band comes back to its initial state in the valency band, the electron hole pair is lost, and we call it as recombination. This energy, the larger energy of the electron in the conduction band, when it comes back to the valency band, might be emitted in the form of radiation. In fact, we talk about two different types of radiation. That energy can come out in the form of radiation, then we call it as radiative transition. It may not come out of the semiconductor in the form of radiation or in the form of light, rather it is used to heat the semiconductor, that is called non-radiative transition. So we have basically both type of transition taking place in the semiconductor. Some of the electron hole pairs basically gives us light. The other electron hole pairs basically heat the system. So that corresponds to the non-radiative transition. So you must be clear about radiative transitions are the one which gives us the radiation. Non-radiative transitions are the one which does not give any radiation, but their energy is transferred to the lattice atoms, transferred to the silicon atoms. So therefore, the whole system is basically heated. You can see this diagram here. This plus and minus, they combine. Plus means hole, minus means electron. They combine together, they recombine, and the process of recombination together basically gives us the light photon, provided this is radiative. If it is non-radiative, then it will be utilized basically to heat this circuit. So they will be separated out. The electrons and holes are basically, they recombine and they emit visible light, provided the band gap of the light emitting diode which we have fabricated is made up of a material whose band gap is in the visible region. So as I told you, I have written the same thing here also. The free electron are in the conduction band and at a higher energy than the holes in the valency band. Where they recombine, the released energy is in the form of light or heat. I repeat again, it will be in the form of light, provided the recombination is radiative in nature. It gives us radiation. It will give us heat if it is non-radiative. The electron will come from conduction band to the valency band, but energy is given to the lattice itself. So now I will give you the example to explain it more. You will read your textbook that germanium and silicon are not used for fabricating the light emitting diode. Now the question is why? Germanium and silicon, almost all the liberated energy goes into the heating of a crystal. What does it mean? The transitions are non-radiative. The energy, the light doesn't come out. Whatever light comes out of the semiconducting material, it is utilized in heating the system only. But if we switch over to another semiconducting material, which is very popular for fabricating these light emitting diode, that is gallium arsenide. Gallium arsenide has a band gap of 1.45 electron volt. So if you make use of the same formula that I showed you in the last picture, that 1240 electron volt nanometer divided by lambda. So lambda corresponds to 850 nanometer, that again lies in the infrared region. So we have to dope this gallium arsenide with proper dopants to engineer its band gap as per our requirement. Because if we want to have a LED giving us light in the visible region, we have to have the material of which these LEDs is made up of to have the band gap corresponding to that range of visible region. If you look at gallium arsenic phosphide, GaAsP, the energy band gap is 1.9 electron volt, which corresponds to a wavelength of 650 nanometer. So this basically corresponds to the red light. Similarly, if you dope gallium in place of arsenic, you dope it with phosphorus, so it becomes gallium phosphide. Its band gap becomes such that it emits green light. So by proper choice of material and tailoring its band gap, the radiation of desired wavelength can be obtained. I hope it is clear that you need the LED to be made up of the material whose wavelength, whose band gap matches with the wavelength of light emitted, which is in the visible region. Another thing I have written here, although I told you that in case of germanium and silicon, entire recombination energy goes into the heating of a crystal. That is why they are not utilized for fabricating light emitting diode. You will read in your textbook, these are called indirect band gap semiconductor, while gallium arsenide is called direct band gap semiconductor. Maybe sometime I will explain you more, because this is the topic of solid state physics, where you will come across why direct band gap semiconducting material are better suited for fabricating light emitting diode than indirect band gap germanium and silicon. So again, if you increase the forward bias current, the radiative power basically increases. So just by changing the amount of forward bias current, we can get more and more light coming out of this light emitting diode. So if I come to a circuit diagram to understand more about a light emitting diode and more about why do we need a resistance, I told you that this resistance in the circuit is basically a safety resistance. Even in PN junction diode and the Zener diode that you will work with in your laboratory in BSc third year, you will see that in forward biasing you will always see a safety resistance into the circuit, but that will not be there in the reverse biasing, because the forward bias currents are very small. If the current suddenly increases, there is a chance of damaging our diode. That is why we make use of a safety resistance while connecting a diode or in forward biasing. So it is a forward bias PN junction diode. You can see yourself that this forward bias current is the input voltage minus the voltage across the diode divided by R resistance. Now the question is, why? In the beginning I said that these LEDs, you also know that in your house also you will find now almost all the CFL being replaced by LED bulbs, because they are low, they operate at low voltage. They have a longer life. Some of the LEDs have several 10 to 15 years life, and they have very fast on-off switching characteristics also. The diode voltage is not very large. It is just 1 to 3 volts. We need basically a very small voltage to operate it. A current is also very small. Normally a current lying between 20 to 100 milliampere is required to operate it, to get a light from it. And these are low power normally in milliwatts. So that is all about, they are very powerful devices. They are used in forward biasing. And in forward biasing, more is the forward bias, more is the light coming out of it, provided the radiative transition are dominant over the non-radiative transitions. Then there is something like multicolor LED. Multicolor LED, the definition, the book's definition is that an LED that emits one color when forward biased and another color when reverse biased is called multicolor LED. In fact, in the market also, you can have basically a LED. Sometimes it gives you red light, sometimes it gives you green light, and sometimes it will give you yellow light also. So let me explain you how is it possible to get all the three colors by using a multicolor LED. You can see now, in fact, you have the two diodes connected in the fashion showed in the figure. You will see that when you forward bias it, when you apply a positive voltage to this end, it is forward biased. When you apply a negative voltage, it is reverse biased. But the two light emitting diodes have been connected in such a way that when you apply a forward biasing like this, one diode will give you light. When you apply a negative voltage, now the other diode becomes forward biased. So now forward biased. So only one diode one time is forward biased and other is reverse biased. That is the reason why you get one color once. So if you change the voltage from a positive value to a negative value very slowly. So suppose you have one LED giving you red light. So if this is forward biased with a positive voltage applied here, you will see a forward bias current goes this way. this diode red color LED will give us light, and this is reverse biased, so we will not see any light from it. But suppose I switch over to a negative voltage here. A negative voltage here will now pass a current in the reverse direction. Now we will see that this LED, which was forward biased in this case, now becomes reverse biased, and we have another LED made for, let us say, green color, and we now have the light coming out from a green LED. So we have basically two LEDs which are encapsulated inside a transparent enclosure, and one time one LED gives us light. Suppose you play with the voltage. You play with the voltage. Playing with the voltage means you have a rapid switch. You suddenly switch on and off. Then you will see as if the light coming out from the LED is basically the superposition of red and green, and that will appear as yellow. So it will give you yellow light when you are basically managing the rapid switching of the light emitting diode. Now, as far as the application is concerned, most of you must have seen that they are used as power indicators. So they are connected in parallel with basically appliance connected for household applications. You can see here that this is the input voltage. When I put the switch on, so the same voltage that I apply across a load is also available basically to this LED. This R is the adjustment resistance or safety resistance, so that we have a reasonable 1 to 3 volt appearing across a LED. So LED is nothing but a power indicator. And other important use is 7-segment display. If you see any digital panel, in fact, if you look at a clock, the same set of 7 light emitting diode, if suppose G, here I have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, these are the 7 LED. Suppose G LED is not glowing and all 6 LEDs are glowing, it corresponds to 0. Similarly, by allowing the proper combination of all these 7 LEDs, in fact, one end of the LED is connected to a 5 volt battery positive and the other is connected to ground. So just by applying a voltage at one end, we can use these LEDs as per our requirement, whether we want to generate number 1 or 2. If we want to generate 1 only, so B and C must be on, or F and E must be on. Suppose we want 3, A must be on, B must be on, G must be on, C must be on, and D must be on. So we get 4. So you can understand yourself that by selecting these 7 LED, we can use it as a number generating system. That is why it is called 7-segment display. Now at the end, I will talk about another device that is also a part of your curriculum, that is thermistor. Thermistor is nothing but thermal resistor, temperature dependent or temperature sensitive resistors. These are nothing but semiconductor type resistance or semiconductor type thermometers whose resistance can increase or decrease with rise in temperature. In fact, both type of behavior has been observed. They have very high sensitivity but highly non-linear characteristics. Highly sensitive means if you compare it with platinum resistance thermometer, so you will find that the change in temperature but the similar change, the change in resistance for the similar change in temperature is much more for the thermistor as compared to RTD or platinum resistance thermometer. There are 2 types of thermistors which are available. One is NTC, negative temperature resistance thermistors, and other is PTC, positive temperature coefficient thermistors. You can see yourself, I have plotted here basically the resistance versus temperature diagram of both NTC and PTC thermistor. So here on this side, the first graph shows you the behavior of RT as a function of T for basically the NTC. It is NTC is nothing but they are made up of using semiconducting material. They are made up of oxides of iron, manganese, and magnesium, etc. If you go into the more details that how does the resistance R depends upon the temperature. So in the literature, you will find out some very different type of behavior exhibited by different NTC and PTC thermistors. One is RT is equal to R0 e to the power of beta 1 over T minus 1 over T0. Here RT is the resistance at temperature T. R0 is the resistance at the reference temperature. T0 here is the reference temperature. Normally, it is taken as 25 degrees centigrade. And beta here is a constant whose value is decided by the characteristics of the material of which you have fabricated these NTC thermistor. Now, for metals, we know RT is equal to R0 1 plus alpha T, and alpha is called the temperature coefficient of resistance. So let us define the same thing. Temperature coefficient of resistance is defined as alpha T is 1 over R delta RT upon delta T. That is how we define RT is equal to R0 1 plus alpha T. If you differentiate this equation here, the equation RT is equal to R0 e to the power of beta into 1 over T minus 1 over T0. If you differentiate and put over here, you will find that alpha T comes out to be minus beta over T square. So since beta is a positive constant and we have a minus sign, so it is negative. So for NTC, the value of alpha, the temperature coefficient of resistance, is negative. NTC normally work in the range from minus 100 degrees centigrade to 300 degrees centigrade only. That means they have a very limited temperature range of operation. But if you scan the market, they are available in different forms. They are available in bead type, rod types, disc type, washer type, etc. Several different shapes NTC thermistors are available in the market. Coming to now PTC. PTC are made up of semiconducting material doped with barium titanate. Barium titanate doped semiconducting materials basically gives us a positive temperature coefficient thermistors. Here the resistance, unlike NTC, changes after a critical temperature, and that I have shown you here by TR. That up to TR, you can see here that up to TR, the resistance is almost constant. After TR, the resistance increases as a function of R. And if you compare, I have not basically plotted here the comparison of NTC and PTC with RTD, resistance temperature thermometers like platinum resistance thermometer. You will see that for if you compare the change in resistance for platinum resistance thermometer and RTC PTC, the change in resistance for the same rise in temperature will be much more for thermistor as compared to RTD. That is why they are more sensitive, but they are non-linear, because coming on to the other side, if you see the behavior of resistance of a platinum resistance thermometer as a temperature, it is almost linear over a wide range of temperature, but here it is non-linear. So it shows non-linearity. That is also a drawback. They are more sensitive, but they have basically the non-linear behavior. So coming to PTC back again, they are made up of semiconducting material doped with barium titanate. The resistance increases with increase in temperature above TR. Now at the end, what are the characteristics which make these thermistors better than resistance RTD or resistance temperature devices? They are low cost, they are small sizes, and their resistance changes rapidly with a small change in temperature. That is what I wrote as sensitivity. They are more sensitive. More sensitive means more change in resistance with a very small rise in temperature. So that is why they are more popular. They have a limited operating range and the RT behavior in non-linear. These are basically the two major drawbacks of these thermistors. Now coming to the applications. They have wide range of applications even these days also. In your Home appliances also, for example, oven, hair dryer, refrigerator, you will see these thermistors being used in almost all the appliances. Thermistors are used in many medical equipments as a temperature sensor. They are also used as temperature compensation circuit in electronic circuits also. So there are several applications. The drawback, the advantage and disadvantage over RTD. RTD, when I call RTD, resistance temperature device, are basically resistance thermometers, a platinum resistance thermometer. So you have, while reading about these thermistors, you have to appreciate the advantage and disadvantage of these thermistors over platinum resistance thermometer, because platinum resistance thermometers are also very powerful tool of measuring temperature. So that is all about this, and I hope with this discussion we come to the end of our first unit. Thank you so much.